What's going on? Boys, thanks to our patrons and Fiverr customers, arm yourselves, life and typology stuff. Today we are covering two aspects of your shadow. Now, the more I study the shadow, the more it confuses me, but I also think it is the key to a worthwhile life, or one of the keys. And we took some notes, but we're going to try not to rely on them. The shadow is weird because it's not just your unconscious mind. It's a bunch of different components weaved together in a way that doesn't entirely make sense to me yet. But two of those components are repression and evil. And today we're going to discuss how to embrace them. We will start with repression. One of the things that drives me craziest about the typology community is the inability just to acknowledge repression and evil, much less address them. And we see this with all types, but it came out strong in our most recent INFJ video. However, one viewer made a dig at me that became an opportunity to addressing repression by example. Now, the comment essentially said, my reaction to everything that happened with my INFJ friend in our little episode came from an alcohol-fueled INTP meltdown that was actually all about resentment. And the first step in dealing with things you are repressing is paying attention to your reactions, especially things you dislike, you hate in a knee-jerk way. Now, not everything you feel this sort of reaction to indicates repression on your part. However, if you are repressing something you are uncomfortable with acknowledging about yourself, that will be there. That is an indicator. The first step is noticing that you've had a reaction. The second step is determining whether or not this reaction is coming from repression or is just something you dislike sincerely. That's difficult, but if you want to address repression, if you want to embrace your shadow, you'll need to spend time distinguishing, figuring that out. And doing this is uncomfortable because it makes you doubt yourself. To try to figure out if repression is going on, you necessarily need to doubt the validity or the truth of your own reaction to something. That's uncomfortable to do. However, doubt, especially self-doubt, is your friend, because it's an opportunity to investigate, and when you investigate, you know. Don't fight self-doubt, investigate it. You'll learn things about yourself. Now, that comment, among all the others, frustrated me so quickly because there was, in that instance, resentment going on. And I think one of the painful, frightening, scary, angering things about investigating yourself this way, things you're repressing, is people getting things right in a way you're uncomfortable with. So with that comment, dude got it right that resentment was at play, but on an instinctive level, I got angry at the suggestion that's all it was. This entire episode was my resentment. And part of the reason I probably got so angry, or did get so angry, was on some level, it's not just that resentment was involved, but it was a big part of it, and it was a bigger part of it than I was letting myself be aware of. Because in my head, I wanted to view this incident as if I were totally innocent, totally wronged, and totally justified for acting the way I did. And I needed to view it that way to defend myself against the truth. Which is, I was too afraid at that time of having no friends, so I went along with everything that was going on, the way this dude operated, I felt resentment, which, in a situation like this, is not only petty to feel, but also pathetic to feel, because I felt I couldn't do or say anything about it because I was so afraid of being alone. I was protecting myself from the fact that I was more pathetic than I could bear. And his little betrayal humiliation thing was my opportunity to vent that resentment I was too uncomfortable or too weak to acknowledge, too scared to acknowledge, and too hurt to acknowledge. Like Michael Corleone in The Godfather, when he's going to kill Sollozzo and McCluskey. It's not personal, Sonny. It's business. It's business. What the dude did warranted an aggressive response. But it was absolutely not just business. It was an opportunity to get personal, perhaps appropriately personal, under the guise of business. I wasn't just talking shit because he wronged me at that moment. I was talking shit because I'd felt consistently wronged for a number of years by that point. This was just the first opportunity to voice it in a way that could pass as warranted. And again, maybe it was warranted. But that is not the way I framed it. That is not the way I viewed it in my head, and I lied to myself about it. To protect myself from the fact I was weak, scared, and hurt, on a level I was not comfortable accepting. And after interrogating myself for a while, that commenter was right. I acted in a warranted way, but I did it for reasons I was repressing, i.e. resentment. Long, quiet, hurt resentment. And after accepting this, doors opened up. The first door, well, more like closing a door, this was a vulnerability in my life. This was something I did not want to accept. Not just in this instance, but in other examples. Now that I'm aware of it, I know what's going on and I've accepted it, it ceases to be something I can be blindsided with. I might still be uncomfortable with it, but I'm aware of it. The next door it opened is realizing resentment is a huge part of my life, especially when it's operating on that quieter, quotes, not worth acknowledging level. I resent more people than I thought I did for reasons I thought I was above resenting anyone for. For example, there have been a few instances in the last few years people have not trusted me by default, even though I gave them no reason to distrust me. In fact, I went above and beyond to give them reasons to trust me, but they still didn't trust me by default. And I thought I was okay with that because I don't trust people by default either. I don't trust anybody. But just because I think something on a conscious level does not mean I'm thinking something completely different on an unconscious level and am hurt by it. How dare you not immediately trust me when I have done everything to make you trust me? And now that I am aware of the role small, quiet resentment plays in my life, I can work on it. Or if I can't resolve it, then I can at least be aware of it and manage it, so it doesn't blindside me. So I don't do some, it's not personal, it's business, Sonny, shit again. So to break this down into steps, you identify one of your reactions as potentially coming from repression, things about yourself you're repressing. You investigate it to see if it is actually coming from repression, if there's anything to it. And then, if it is coming from repression, you work out why you're repressing it. What are you protecting yourself from? And once you have identified the truth that is too or was too horrible for you to bear, you do your best to accept it. Even if that means contextualizing it in a way that makes you feel a little better. And previously, we would have said, don't contextualize it to make yourself feel better, but now that we have been run over by the semi truck of reality, we have witnessed what totally unfiltered reality can do to you. Contextualize it all you need. My example, I wouldn't call it an alcohol-infused meltdown. Alcohol was involved, but I wouldn't call it a meltdown. And a harsh reaction was warranted, whether or not it was personal or impersonal. Dude was a manipulative, lying jackass. And if we were actually friends, that entire episode, both sides of it, was something we could have worked out, and we didn't. Because we weren't actual friends. That was the other thing I think I was protecting myself from. How painful it is to realize the person you have felt closest to was never really on your side. And being weak enough to be hurt by something like that. But once you're aware of all this stuff, and have accepted it as much as you can, some of these things are like projects, it takes time to accept them, they can't control you. And in that same way, you are in more control. And these steps are the ones I use to acknowledge repression, acknowledge uncomfortable things about myself, and move beyond them. Instead of staying forever in the knee-jerk, fuck that, hate that, boo stage. Because if you stay there, not only are you never going to learn anything about yourself or improve yourself, get ahead, instead of staying mired in one spot, but also you are easier to control. Or you are unable to control yourself. Because the basics of your identity are centered around defending self-deception. And if someone is aware that you are deceiving yourself and you need to deceive yourself, they can control you, or you won't be able to make certain good or necessary decisions when those decisions threaten your self-deception. Everyone is in control but you, and you're vulnerable. What better way to signal to people that you can be attacked than by immediately and enthusiastically putting up a shield anytime someone comes anywhere near even touching your self-deception? You're signaling vulnerability. You are asking for someone to kick your legs out from under you. Now, the next part of embracing your shadow and overcoming repression comes in the form of evil. Because this is one of the parts about the shadow that confuses me. Because evil is tied up in your shadow, but your day-to-day MO is bad. Now, you might not be an awful person who does awful things, but you do generally every day operate on a level of badness that is less intense than awfulness or evil, but it's still bad, but it is low frequency or low intensity enough you can excuse yourself to yourself and others. You probably think you're a good person walking around as a good person because right now you are able to excuse the fact you are bad. Your badness is not so intense you can't mental gymnastics your way out of it for yourself and talk your way out of it or position your way out of it with others. But that does not change the fact you are a naturally inconsiderate, self-serving person. Especially when you do lots of what you think are selfless things to excuse your nasty nature to yourself. You can volunteer 5 hours every day at a soup kitchen and still come home and scream at your spouse. But you'll tell yourself that's okay because you're a good person who volunteers your time. Or your spouse is shitty, and if they didn't want you acting shitty to them, they wouldn't be shitty themselves. Every single excuse. And incidentally, I think one of the reasons the world is in such a bad state and people are so evil and awful to one another is the fact we can't even acknowledge our basic badness. And if it's too uncomfortable to acknowledge the fact you are a bad person day to day, how are you going to address the true evil shit? It's never going to happen. One of the reasons people who pose as saints or even think of themselves as overall base state good bug me so much is the fact they are guaranteed making the world worse because they are daily doing bad or evil shit thinking it's good. And working on understanding and managing your natural inborn human evil is much harder and less rewarding than it is to posture oneself as a good or great person. You are contributing to a problem while pretending you're someone solving it. The worst kind of sinners. Sympathy for the devil. So, how do you deal with your low frequency, low intensity bad nature and your shadow's evil that comes out? And when it comes out, if you're just a bad person and you haven't acknowledged your badness or your evil, it's going to frighten you, it's going to cause you problems, and you're going to make a bunch of excuses for it when that evil comes out. What do you do about it? Well, I'm finding it's not doing good actions, and it's not just acknowledging your badness or your awfulness or your evil. You take an active role in your evil. We talked about venting stress in little ways last time. I think you're doing the same thing here, but with negativity. If you pretend it doesn't exist, your evil meter rises faster and it stays room temperature at a higher level and it comes out more. But you think it doesn't because you're making excuses for yourself. However, when you take an active role in your evil, firstly, you're venting it more frequently and you have more of a say in when it's vented. You are aware of the status of your evil meter, you're aware of how much evil you have inside you at any moment, and you can direct it in ways that are nasty, but aren't devastating or debilitating for you or for anyone else. Even though when you are engaging in this sort of evil consciously, some people are necessarily hurt. But what can you do? Better to hurt people and know about it than hurt people and pretend you're doing them a favor or you're a good person for doing it. You're going to be hurting people no matter what, you're a human. And engaging in evil when you acknowledge that it is evil is an acquired taste, but it is a taste and you can acquire it. I take great joy when I engage in evil, knowing I have made someone's day worse or their life harder. Probably one of the nastiest things about me is my pleasure in forcing people to accept things about themselves they are trying to ignore. Basically, those vulnerabilities we mentioned earlier, I like identifying those, building a case, and confronting people with them so they can't hide from it, and so it hits them in the worst way possible. Hopefully so they then go on and address it, but also because it feels good exploiting a vulnerability somebody gave me. But that's higher end shit, and you'll find many people are too weak or stupid to realize they are weak and stupid. So even if you do prove it to them in a perfect way, it's not going to have any effect because they're too weak and stupid. But you can take joy, or I take joy, in knowing they are stupid enough to get really upset, and that means I've made their day worse, and they're probably stupid and weak enough and probably unstable enough if they are too weak and stupid to acknowledge and work on any of these things about themselves. They have no self-control. That anger you have created in them, they will take out on other people. And then those people might take out that anger on more people. It's like a butterfly effect, a ripple of misery. Cutting somebody off, giving somebody a shitty look, passive aggressively and non-verbally making it clear that I don't approve of something somebody has done or said, even though, who the hell am I to approve of something? Who am I to judge anyone for anything? That's frustrating. That's really frustrating, and I like seeing people get frustrated when I do it. These are small and mundane, but utterly nasty things to do. Making someone's day worse and enjoying that. But do you know what it isn't? Scheming to ruin somebody's livelihood, thinking I'm justified for doing it. Stalking somebody in a threatening manner, thinking I'm justified for doing it. Physically harming other people, and thinking I'm justified for doing it. When you acknowledge your evil for what it is, and participate in those horrible drives inside yourself voluntarily, you can usually do evil in the least destructive ways possible for others and for yourself, and you can enjoy it. Now, there's also an element to this of doing the big evil consciously. These utterly unjustifiable major actions we talk about sometimes. But even in those instances, at least you are aware that these things are unjustified, and you have a conscious say in them. Because if you don't acknowledge them as evil, if you don't participate in them voluntarily, you don't have a say, you're still going to do these unjustifiable things, but you'll have no control over what you do, when you do it, how you do it, and odds are good you're going to fool yourself into thinking this was a good thing, when you should, especially in these really awful, really evil, unjustifiable areas, you need to know that you are doing evil. These are the instances you least want to be able to, or try to, justify it to yourself or anybody else. You need to know what you're doing. A society of people who think they're saints is going to be hell, because people, or these terrific saints, are going to be inhumanly cruel to each other and to the rest of their society, thinking they're being saintly. If you know what you're doing is evil, if everybody knows what they're doing is evil, there is at least the possibility this evil can be conducted in an organized manner, in a way that's not going to result in cycles of violence. Because everyone will be acting like everything is business when it is, in fact, all personal. All personal and all spilling everywhere on everything and everyone. Moral codes are the worst thing to happen to morality in human history. Goodness and its consequences have been a disaster for the human race. So, stop repressing and choose evil consciously instead of being enslaved by it unconsciously. You'll feel a bit better, you'll operate a bit better, and maybe the world will get a little bit better. Like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you haven't.